Clarence, how you doing?
Hey, buddy, it's good to see you.
Good seeing you. Good seeing you.
I always ask, as you know, I always ask about your family.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think you're an undeserving brother now that I think about it. Okay? And I mean that in the sense that you have such a beautiful wife.
Yep.
Beautiful parents. But every time I've been with them, they've been so gracious to me. They almost treat me like extended family.
Well, they're doing great. Both turned 71 this year. 51 years of marriage in June. So, they're doing good. They're doing good.
That's good.
So back I'll have them in Memphis for the commemoration of assassination, because they've never been in Memphis. I said, okay, fine, y'all come along.
That's beautiful.
This time of year is always interesting because so many people focus on the assassination of Dr. King in April. But they forget, I think, in many ways, why he was in Memphis. I was in Memphis in early February when they had a wreath-laying ceremony for the 2 sanitation workers who were killed. And that, to me, I think, is critically important. People have to remember why he was doing what he was doing, not just gave a speech, had a march.
Right. It's a very profound the question, It's very profound. I should tell you that something, after he gave this speech on April 4th, 1967, opposing the war in Vietnam, it's almost like he became an economist, like, I mean, a very erudite person. The basis for his, and I'll answer your question, but the basis for his opposition to the war, aside from morality and the violence, is that Martin said, we can count. Ain't no way Johnson can talk about having this war on poverty, because $8 billion a month was going to Vietnam. The treasury of the United States, of the government, was being squandered. There was no money, and so forth. And I remember when the question of the Memphis garbage strikers came up, I had initially didn't want him to go, not because I didn't agree with it, but because it conflicted with something else that had asked me to do. And then he's pushing back on me, and then he says, well, if I don't go there, where am I going to go to demonstrate the reality of what I talk about, the least of these? He says, there's no question that the city of Memphis is treating these garbage workers like they're just on the plantation. They have no respect for them. No respect for them. All right? And it was a very powerful statement of his continuing war on poverty. When you think about it, I don't have the stats now, but when you think about it, the wages that they were making, were so awful. And I don't know whether you mentioned it, but 2 garbage workers lost their lives by just being ground up, accidents and so forth.
They were making, when I was down there, they were making $7 a day.
Yeah.
And then what I was told was that that if it rained,
right,
they would and if it rained and it stopped raining,
right,
they would tell the white workers, okay, come back to work.
Right.
But the black workers, when they went home, would never get a phone call, so they would lose a full day's wage.
Right. So that Memphis, by an accident of history, became a very profound symbol, as you can think of those signs. I am a man. Remember those profound signs? Just sign after sign just says, I am a man.
When I talked to Bill Lucy, I said, how'd y'all come up with that? And he explained that. But what was interesting is he said that the strike wasn't about, he said it wasn't about wages. It wasn't about health care. He said it was about basic respect.
That's what it was.
He said these black men simply wanted respect.
Right. And I remember, I think it was Jerry Worth and Bill Lucy, the Public Employees Union and other unions, they got it. They understood that the labor movement had to do something to support these workers, okay? Support these black workers in Memphis, to really show that the labor movement cared. And it really, wages were an important condition. There was a question. Working conditions were an important question. But the underlying issue was this question of basic respect. And Loeb was the mayor, right? I think Loeb was the mayor of Memphis. He had a plantation mentality. Plantation mentality treated them like how dare they question him? How dare they question him? And as a matter, hindsight, I guess, is more erudite than foresight. But aside from acting on his conscience, the way in which he articulated, Martin, articulated the importance of the strike, not only to his supporters, but to the public, was very profound, because he got them to see that really this is a basic question of not only manhood and respect, but really basic question of economics. The question that really defined, some people may not agree with this. I happen to believe that while he was concerned about poverty and militarism and so forth, I happen to believe that April 4th, 1967, that was the defining point, not only in terms of his, quote, public opposition to the war, but that became his defining point in really really committing himself more than had been before to the whole question of poverty and the least of these. He used to say the least of these.
I talked to Reverend Al Sampson, one of
buddy.
two individuals who Dr. King personally ordained as minister, and he said,
one of them.
and he talked about the book, The Guaranteed Income,
Right.
And he said his whole idea
Right.
of that really stemmed from that book, A Guaranteed Income, and you see that showing up in his speeches and in his writings, and in his book Chaos or Community. What I think really stands out when he said it didn't cost America much for us to be able to sit in, to go to parks, to sit in hotels and swimming pools. He said, now will America write that check, to right all of these wrongs? He said that's going to be the real question. And what really jumped out, and I want you to speak to this, when he said the real issue will be our white allies. They will not be with us. And when you begin to look at American history, after every period, I've always said, you always had black success followed by white backlash. Into the Civil War, Reconstruction, Great Compromise. Civil Rights Movement, then all of a sudden, Civil Rights Movement, then they say, okay, look, we've done enough for y'all. Even President Obama, 8 years.
I got it. I see where you're going. And I think there's a substantial validity to what you're saying. I have a shorthand way of saying, at the so-called, not the I Have a Dream speech, August 28, 1963, celebrated person. I would say in terms of poll ratings, maybe at a 60% approval rating. That's okay, maybe even greater. When he started dealing with the question of economics and against the war, okay, as celebrated as he was, I would say his poll rating was no more than 40 to 50%.
Yeah, because when you start talking about America's money,
hello,
America goes, hey,
okay.
look, we gave y'all the vote,
and then being really personally hurt when leaders of the civil rights movement would attack him.
Roy Wilkins,
Whitney Young. Yeah,
you had
what we call them Johnson surrogates. Okay.
You had Carl Rowan.
Carl Rowan. As much as I loved him, I mean, how could he do that? Okay. And that personally got to him. It really personally got to him. In fact, he used to say, they know better than that. And then Clarence Jones, in my more cynical period, I said, well, hey, Johnson is dropping them little crumbs from the plantation, rather. That's because, Whitney Young, the Urban League, these were Negro leaders of those organizations who got along to go along because it was easier for them. Okay. And when I don't know whether it's Roy Wilkins or Whitney Young, but one black leader says, well, Martin doesn't have any qualifications. He doesn't know anything about American foreign policy.
It sounds like Roy Wilkins.
He doesn't know anything about American foreign policy. I mean, give me a break. But the April 4th, 1967, you look off of that, started the Poor People's March later on. I remember they had an SCLC board meeting in May of 1967, in which he announced a major commitment, the Poor People's Campaign. And he said in one of his speeches, it didn't cost him anything. They let us have a cup of coffee at a lunch counter. You know what I'm saying? When it really started dealing with money, and then I would come and with my particular, he used to say he said, now Clarence, sometimes I understand why they think you might be a communist because you talk so radical sometimes. And I said, Martin, I'm just telling you, it's all about money. It's all about money. Okay? And you were messing with this man's money.
Do you believe that his life, that his death notice was printed on April 4th, 67.
Absolutely.
I mean, just no coincidence. I'm sorry. You can't tell me it's just coincidence. He's killed to the day.
Can I tell you something? I've never heard it said that way. But that's what happened. That's right. That's right. That was a qualitative, fundamental change in the way in which America looked at Martin Luther King Jr., or the way in which the power structure. Now, we don't have enough time in this interview, but he really became, he wasn't dangerous when he gave his March on Washington speech. You know, dangerous. You know, I mean, he was celebrated. Okay, he became dangerous. I think the people in the White House with Johnson, they knew the potential power that Martin had. Now they could say Reverend Dr. Benjamin Spock and William Sloane Coffin and all the anti-war people were prominent, but they didn't have the national stature. Didn't have the national stature. Okay. And when he was being pushed, he said, you know, when I got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, I had an obligation. I have a moral obligation. In fact, he used to say bitterly, he says, they didn't get, he would say, Roy Wilkins didn't get a Nobel Peace Prize in 64, I did. No, he said, I have an obligation. I have an obligation to speak out against the war. Okay. So he was, and I like the way, that was his death notice. Yeah. Yeah, I believe that. We're sitting in the library of the King Papers Project here at Stanford University. And so there is a distinguished, my colleague and brother, Dr. Claiborne Carson, who's a much more erudite, knowledgeable person in African American history than I am. I have some knowledge. I have profound political beliefs, okay? And I think I can marshal a great deal of evidence to support my beliefs. I don't believe, you didn't ask me the question, but I don't believe that Martin King really was seen as a threat after his March on Washington speech. I think what the speech was an aspirational speech. He's really summoning America to be the best that he could be, okay? Within 1 year and then a couple of years more, when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed, and when the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed, okay? And you add to that his speech on April 4th, 1967. I'm using the generic now.
Mm-hmm.
The political power, economic power structure say, hold on now. Hold on. That's too much.
Well, in fact, I think if you actually take it back even a year earlier, when he decides to go to Chicago, and now he's dealing with housing. Housing, now you're dealing with home ownership. You're still dealing with money.
Right.
Now you're dealing with these structural issues, and now you've now moved out of the South, and now you're dealing with what's happening in the Midwest. And then, of course, Watts happens. And then all of a sudden he goes to LA and not really understanding the depths of poverty in these big cities. And then it comes back to money as well. And so it was amazing reading Nick Cott's book, Judgment Days, where he said after the riots, it was King and LBJ both went through this period of depression over those riots. Money became real. Wages, jobs, lack of upper mobility, lack of home ownership, all of that, which also drove the need for the Fair Housing Act.
Yeah. So we sit here, you know, yesterday, maybe today, it was the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission.
Yep.
You know, the Kerner Commission.
2 Americas, 1 white, 1 black.
Moving in, And Johnson asked for this commission. following the riots in 1960. That started out because he couldn't understand what happened. Johnson couldn't understand. And when I was just looking online about the Kerner Commission report, and I thought to myself, 50 years later, the question is, how much has been achieved? How much has been achieved? The question today about authentically interpreting the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. as we stand within the shadow of the 50th anniversary of his assassination next month is that wherever possible, I try to, with respect to the opinions that other people have, even I try to do it with scholars who are much more learned than I am in history, I try to get them to look at Martin King, the whole person, and see the context, right? You just said something very chilling, but I think historically accurate. April 4th was really a death. That was April 4th, 1967. And I know some people say, Clarence, he's smarter than that. He sounds like one of those old-time lefties, so forth. Hello, April 4th, 1967. It's not just what he said in opposing the war, but if you read the speech, the analysis, okay, it's about violence and economics. That's what it is. It's about violence and economics. And he asked that poignant question to speak, how can I walk through the ghettos of the cities and tell my young African American brothers that they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't use guns and so forth. How can I do that? And at the same time, stand by and see my country go and kill innocent people far away, or as I like Muhammad Ali has a way of putting it very succinctly. Ain't no Viet Cong ever called me nigger when he refused to. Ain't no Viet Cong ever called me nigger. That was a profound. I think when the press tried to sort of turn the public, even the black public, against Muhammad Ali, one was that he had become a Muslim, and two, he wasn't patriotic, okay? Muhammad just stated it. Ain't no Viet Cong ever called me nigger, okay? And that resonated. It resonated with a lot of people, okay? We haven't had in the last 50 years, we haven't had a person of the national stature of Martin Luther King Jr. who could really point the finger to the jugular vein. Now we have, we have erudite. We have my brothers Cornel West, Ta'ishi Coates. We have great intellect and so forth. But I'm talking about people who combine not only analysis, but with action. Remember, we're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who had an earned PhD in theology under the tutorship of his most beloved Howard Thurman. Okay? You see these books back here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. These books describe, they do a chronology of the thought process, of the thinking that went into Martin Luther King Jr. during some critical years. Because those books contain excerpts of his sermons, of his private correspondence. Now, while I was privileged to be political advisor, personal lawyer, and draft speechwriter for 7.5 years. I had nothing to do with his sermons. Okay. In fact, I remember going with him, but I didn't want to go, but he insisted. I go with him on a tour in rural Alabama. Okay. And you go, and this is these churches. You go into rural Alabama, and there were 400, 500 member churches. 70-80% of the people, first of all, had on overalls. Many of them didn't have on shoes. Okay. And Martin said, "You got to come with me," And I would sit down the first row. He said, "No." Sometimes he would insist that I come sit as a guest with him on the pulpit. I was very uncomfortable. I said, "No, first of all, I'm not a preacher. I don't want to be on the pulpit." He said, "Well, I gotta." And so anyway, I got to introduce you. And so every once in a while, he would introduce me, and then he would say, he said, "I'm glad I got you on this tour because you've got to learn how to talk different than that." He said, later and so forth. It was very helpful. But one of the most memorable things I remember seeing, he was giving this sermon to this church, and he had these people, they were just gripped. And he got to a part of the sermon, and he said, "And as that great philosopher Aristotle would say, blah, 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 blah. And the great German philosopher Hegel and so and so." And he would quote all these things. And these people would say, "Amen and amen." So after the service, I said, "Martin," I said, "you know all these people. They ain't never heard." I said, why do you do that?" He said, "Were you paying attention?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "They didn't have to know anything about Aristotle and Hegel and Heraclitus and all those things. But they got the context. The context affirmed their experience. So that's why they say amen." Now, that taught me something. That here you had this doctor of theology, this erudite person, 4th generation Baptist preacher, who was able to develop a way. He wasn't imprisoned by the learning. If you want another example of that, you think of this speech he gave after they had marched 51 miles after the
in Montgomery.
March to Montgomery. Summit to Montgomery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Montgomery. Okay. And they get across, and the speech the speech was just across the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was like 25 feet from him, assembled, and after he says, "Well, let's talk about it," and it's like a call and response. If you look, read the speech, or you hear the speech, it's a call and response.
How long? Not long.
Hold on. No, I was there. I saw what happened. Somebody yelled like somebody was sitting up there, "Dr. King, how long?" Dr. King told him, "Not long." Okay? And then he picked up, this person said, how long do we have to wait to do this, Dr. King? And he said, "Not long." But then he goes into this peroration about the arc of the universe, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. How long? Not long. But to see it, but to literally see it, physically see it. That speech, you can't make that stuff up. That speech, Roland, I got to tell you, the courthouse, the courthouse is like where that building was across the street, okay? Mm-hmm. And there's a certain exhilaration, come all that distance, all right? And
well, first of all, anybody who has not been to Montgomery doesn't even realize that literally, if you're standing in front of, when I visited, you're standing in front of Dexter Avenue, the Capitol's right there.
That's right.
So it's not like it's
right there.
5 miles. I was in front of the church.
But what I'm trying to say is that whole,
it's right there.
That whole 4.5 day, whether it was trip, as everybody is up, there's this kind of sense they made it, And what he was saying, aside from he didn't have any. I watched him. He didn't have any. He was speaking extemporaneously. He didn't have any notes. I mean, I didn't see any notes anyway because I saw him. But it was a call and response. It was like he was preaching. And I never will forget, Dr. King, how long? Not long. And he had a call and response. That's when he started. And the other thing I want to tell you is that there's certain things that come to mind. When he was speaking with his, the preacher he was close to was Aretha Franklin's father.
C.L. Franklin.
C.L. Franklin. Oh, yeah, C.L. Franklin. Gardner Taylor, C.L. Franklin, and oh God, I got 2 or 3 times. They were very close. Okay, and when he was in Detroit, if you look at that speech too, he talks about the dream there, but doesn't get
December '63.
Yeah, June.
Yep.
I think June 21st,
right.
Maybe June 25th. But there's a part of it in which he says, it's not very complicated. People ask, well, what do we want? It's not very complicated. He says, what we want can be summarized in 3 words. Is all, here, and now. We want all of our rights. We want them here, and want them now. All, here, and now. I mean, think of the brilliance of that, all, here, and now. As we stand within the shadow of the legacy of his assassination, I'm hoping that we don't get caught up in all this playing of the dream speech and all this stuff. I hope we don't do that, because that's going to diminish. Memphis, Tennessee, his commitment to be there, his speech in Vietnam, even his erudite speech he made in April '67 when he came to Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly there's a speech he made at the Fairmont Hotel in August '67 to the National Association of Negro Realtors and so forth. Beautiful speech in which he talks, these are all Negro realtors, middle-class realtors. Mm-hmm. He's saying to them, he says, some of you forget what it's like. You get in your cars on your freeway and you go and you look back, so forth. And he says, I want to talk to you, I want to remind you of the least of these. And who are the least of these? And then he gives a verbal, meticulous description. He talks about the least of these living in rat-infested apartments, the least of these, and so forth and so forth. And he talks about drug addicts, people, people men leaving home because they can't support their family, and so forth. And at the end of it, he says something very poignant to speaking to these Negro professional realtors. In effect, he's saying, don't look down on them, because he says, but for the grace of God, there go I. But for the grace of God, there go I. But for the grace of God, you could be. Powerful, powerful. So who do we have? So I have, I have differences with people that I love, Barack Obama wasn't the end and be all, but he was an African American president, and I thought he made some major contributions. Okay, So when I hear people, some of my African Americans, attack him friends for not being militant enough, you know. Some of them even go so far, some of my beloved intellectual friends were calling him, having a gangster presidency. I said, Cornell, now you've gone too far. Okay? I read very carefully Ta-Nehisi Coates' book about Obama the president. I understand that. But let me tell you something. Obama understood that he would not have been president. Would not have been possible for him to be president. But for those persons who walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, he understood that. He understood that better than any president I've ever seen. And I remember telling him a story. I remember telling him a story. I was at the home of Professor Claiborne Carson. He had a whole group of us over in 2008 to watch the election returns. I don't know, about 30, a lot of people there with food on the table and so forth. And when NBC or one of the networks declared that Senator Obama had now acquired sufficient electoral votes to be called President-elect Obama, several people in the room, adults, started crying and tearing up. It's not just joy, but crying and tearing up. Young people getting tearing up. And some unknown person came up to me. I don't know who it was. There was food on the table, and Carson put out a very nice spread and so forth, and there was wine and so forth. Some person came up to me, and I was tearing up too, and they said, Mr. Jones, did you ever think you lived long enough to see an African-American president? I said, no, as a matter, I don't. And so it must be very moving to you. I said, yes, but my tears are not for the election of Barack Obama as president. It took him back a little. I said, my tears are for all of those persons whom I personally knew, who made his election possible. And then I spontaneously just called the roll. Fannie Lou Hamer, James Orange, Jimmy Lee Jackson. I just all came out. And this person had heard of some of them, but no, I said, that's who my tears are for.
Now that's interesting because I was on the set of CNN. And when that happened, tears began to come out, and Anderson Cooper came to me and said, I see her tearing up. And I said on air, I said, I'm not crying because of him. I said, what immediately came to mind for me were the black soldiers who were lynched in their uniforms after World War II.
Oh, baby. Yeah, that's deep.
And then I began to, and some of the people you talk about, I actually named some of those too.
Yeah, right.
But I said, that's who I immediately thought about.
Right.
And that put it in context for folks in terms of what that meant. Let me you said that earlier, and I say this in speeches all the time. That I've said it publicly, I've said it on TV, radio, I don't care what anybody says. I have a fundamental problem in the fact that Dr. King has become America's civil rights mascot. That he's sort of this bobblehead figure that we put on the shelf. And oh, he was nice, he was wonderful, he wanted everybody to get along. Oh, he was passive, he was just, and then you see these individuals, and not picking any party, but when you see significant numbers of Republicans who will send a notice out or quote him or post a photo, and policies are completely against where he stood.
Right.
For me, that's offensive.
It's not only offensive, it's blasphemous. It's immoral. It's not only offensive, it cuts. It denigrates not only the moral sanctity, but the purity of his political commitment. You understand? You got to this was not just, you know, I have to catch myself because sometimes I be careful because I figure people are saying things and they say, well, you know, he was with Dr. King. He's trying to self-aggrandizement. You know, he's trying to puff himself up. Well, no, it ain't about me. It ain't about, let me tell you, the person I observed and saw sometimes 24/7 was genuinely the conscience of this country. Genuinely. I didn't think so originally. But as I began to work more and more with him, and as I write in my memoir, you know, I was not committed to nonviolence. I told Martin, no, I said, I'm not committed to nonviolence. You got to understand, when I was in the United States Infantry, you know, did the Korean War, you know, I was active in sports. And my attitude when I first met him, I said, white man comes after me, I'm going to kick his butt, he's going down. You know, oh, Clarence, you can't talk like that. And I one of us, Dorothy Cotton, whom I love, and he used to say to Martin, you know, you got to keep Clarence. Don't let Clarence, don't either let him, either insist that he go through one of our programs, but do not let him get in any demonstrations because he will embarrass you because he means what he says. So people ask me, I was never in any demonstration. First of all, he said, well, I was going to look at my lawyers in jail, so forth. You know? But I told him I was not going to come on with this nonviolence. I respect you, Martin, but I will kick the man's butt. And then
He said, yeah, you got to stay at home. You got to stay at home.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say to you is then something happened. Something happened between 1967. Something happened in 1967 and 1968. And I then began to say, you know, this is one bad dude. Martin Luther King Jr. was fearful, but he was fearless. Fearful, but fearless. Now, you're close to a religious teaching on our people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just mouthing. No, he genuinely believed that his Lord Jesus Christ could protect him, you know? And he was imbued with all that spiritual stuff and learning and very much influenced by Gandhi, but he genuinely believed. And the most powerful political statement of that, the day after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, Kennedy was assassinated in
June of 68.
November 22nd.
Oh, John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, John F. Kennedy, I'm sorry. John F. Kennedy, November 22nd was a Friday, 1963. And so I couldn't get together. Anyway, he comes up, we meet at LaGuardia Airport on a Saturday, November 23rd. And I remember him deplaning at LaGuardia. And as I come into vision, he says, you see, it's what he said. He doesn't say, Clarence, how are you? He says, you see, if they can get to anybody. They can get to me. So you and everybody, you got to stop all this nonsense. Nothing you can do to protect me. Spontaneous. That's what he said. Right? It's beyond the scope of this interview, but you know, he became very depressed in 1967 and 68. Combination of you know, the marshaling the support. Chicago blew him away psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Walking, and in Cicero, Illinois, Clarence, I saw hate in those faces that was as great or greater than I've seen in any place in Mississippi or Alabama. That's what he said. He said, no, I never saw such hate. That's when he knew this country was the intensity of they wanted to kill him. They wanted to kill him.
Describe for you April 4th, 1968. What were you doing that day? Where were you?
April 4th, 1968, I was in my office in Wall Street, and I was leaving early because I was preparing to go down to Memphis, Tennessee. I had already talked to Martin earlier and to Bernard Lee and Andy about the logistics, about I want to be sure that you're going to have somebody meet me at the airport so you can take me directly to the place where he was speaking. Okay. So I'm rushing to go to the airport. And the phone rings. And I said, I don't answer the phone. And something said, I don't know. I said, answer the phone. So I picked up the phone. It's Harry Belafonte. I said, Harry, I can't talk to you. I'm rushing to the airport. I'm going down to see Martin now. He said, you got your television? I said, no. I said, he says, Martin's been shot. I said, what? So I turned on the television. And that's all it is. Martin Luther King Jr.'s been shot, you know. I get on the phone. I can't reach anybody. All the lines are busy. I can't reach Billy Kyles. I can't reach anybody. Can't reach Bernard. Can't reach anybody. Can't anybody meet me. And I'm trying to decide what to do. And the phone rings again. You know, I wasn't even paying to the television. The television's in another room, and I'm trying to get through on the phone. Harry Belafonte, he says, Martin's dead. And he says to me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, what do you think I should do? He said, I don't think you should. Harry says, I don't think you should go. I said, we should get some more information. I don't think you should go. So I hang up the phone. And the very first thing that came into my mind was, they finally got him. They finally got him. Sometime our book ended. Sometime between April 4th, 1967 and April 4th, 1968, I had come to the conclusion that was not a question of whether Martin King would be assassinated. It was only when. And I discussed it very closely with Stanley Levison. And he said, well, this has always been a danger. I said, no, Stanley, you don't understand. Something new has happened. He said, yeah, I agreed. No, but I was really, and I was, you know, also angry. And so when that happened, they finally got him. Within that same thought, Roland, your family, I can tell you. I wondered to myself, I said, I don't think I can stay in this country. It's fine. I'm having a conversation. No, I can't stay in this country. I'm Clarence Jones. I said, no, I can't stay in this country. The anger was so seething, you know. And I was drinking more heavily than I drink today. You know, I was drinking, you know, martinis and traveling throughout the South. I was drinking my Jack Daniels and so forth, you know, hanging out. Orville Billingsley, you know, you couldn't have a conversation with Orville Billingsley unless you drank. You know? So I was just, the anger was just beyond. I had made a personal judgment. I said, Clarence, you have to leave this country. That's what I'm talking to myself. I said this to Harry. I said, Harry, I can't stay here. So why? I said, because I don't think I have the discipline. I said, I was afraid. I had such crazy things like, I was 37 years old. He was 39, okay? And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I hear about all these bad guys in the Blackstone Rangers and how they're going to do this. I said, but I was trained in the Special Forces unit. You know? I said, all these talk about, I said, I really know how to kill. I mean, this is the way this really said. I really know how to kill a person 10 different ways. You know, that's the way I began. I was trained to do that. And I thought to myself, I ought to figure out how to get in touch with some of the guys that were in the Army with me. I said, this is how you asked me this question. I began to think crazy things. I began to think crazy things. I think, you know, maybe I ought to go out and talk to the, so help me God, maybe I should go out and talk to the Blackstone Rangers and so forth. I said, you know, they're probably going to see me in my suit. They're going to say, who are you? But when I finished talking to them, I said, no, all you guys are walking around bad with your little guns and so forth. You don't know how to do a damn thing. I said, what you need to do, I mean, this is the way I was thinking. I said, I need to think whether or not, and you know, I was influenced by Che Guevara in my writings. I was, you know, all these things. I mean, Che Guevara could do it, and Castro can do it, you know, and if Ahmed Ben Bella could, I was going through the, you know, I was going through all the liberation people. I mean, it's sort of crazy. Like, who am I? Just middle class, educated lawyer, but I had some training. I mean, I was training, and so I said, that's what we need to do. I said, everybody else is out there selling wolf tickets because they don't know how to do it. I said, they don't really know how to kill, but I know how to kill. And that, so help me God. So I said, I want to see if I could be. And then when I began to think of myself, I said, I can't believe that I'm thinking this way. Okay. And I shared a little bit of that with Harry Belafonte and another fellow, a good friend of mine out in, I told Al Sampson and Benny Johnson in Chicago, you know. So Bennett said, calm down. He said, if you want to sit with the Blackstone Rangers and so forth. So I had to, I went, after the funeral, so forth, I had to get out. I think I went to France and Italy for a little while. But the anger was so intense. It was so intense. They finally got him. Now, by the way, February 15th, I'm sitting with James Comey in his office, former FBI director. I'm sitting with him for about an hour. I got some nice pictures with him. And finally, after we talked about the FBI and so forth, and I said, the last 10 or 15 minutes we're together, it's like, there's a big long table between us. He's sitting over here and I'm sitting here. And I said, you know, Mr. Director, he says, call me James. I said, well, Mr. Director, I said, there's one thing I want to talk to you before I go. I said, it's about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. I said, I know the Warren Commission, some kind of commission, you have these files, and I think maybe some of the files are not even going to be opened up until a later date. And I said, you don't have to say anything. I said, I just want to tell you something. I said, now, you know, some of the King children went into the prison and they actually talked to James O'Reilly. And one of them, Dexter, they said, no, I don't believe he killed my father, you know. Well, I believe that James O'Reilly pulled the trigger. I think the evidence is abundant that James O'Reilly pulled the trigger of the rifle to kill Martin Luther King Jr. But James O'Reilly did not wake up in the early morning of April 4th, 1968, all by himself and say, today is the day I'm going to kill that King nigger. No. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination was the result of a cold, calculated, premeditated conspiracy to kill him. And I believe that conspiracy goes right to the feet of the Hunt brothers in Texas. That's what I believe. Okay? I can't prove it. But that's what I believe. But don't insult my intelligence to think that some highly limited educated James O'Reilly, he had a map of Canada, so he didn't have any education, he didn't have any geography. Where did he get? He didn't know that. It was clearly it was so forth, you know. And so he leaned over to me. He says, "You have some very strong opinions." I said, "Yes, I do." So I said, "You and the government may think that the case is closed, but I don't think so. And he said to me, "You didn't hear me say the case was closed, did you?" I said, "No." "You didn't hear me say the case was closed, did you?" I said, "No, sir." Deep, right? And you know, by the way, I mean, you don't know, I'll tell you. He has a huge, Comey had a huge desk in his office.
Mm-hmm.
Had a glass top on it. Under the corner of the glass top is a photostatic copy of the memo from Robert F. Kennedy, from J. Edgar Hoover to Robert F. Kennedy, asking the authority to wiretap Martin Luther King Jr., in which the Attorney General had to countersign it, and it shows, "Okay, do it. Okay, do it." He says, "The reason I'm showing you, Mr. Jones, is every time there's a meeting of agents in my office, particularly a new agent, before they leave, I make them look at this." And I says, "The FBI can never become that agency again."
Are you happy that this young preacher came to LA and was speaking to this young lawyer who only wanted to make money, never called your name, but was talking directly to you?
Well, it was the most unfair thing that Martin King ever did to me. I'd never in Reverend H.P. Charles's church in the Baldwin Hills, I'd never heard Martin King speak before. I knew that I was in for something special when after he was introduced by the resident preacher.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.